I'm finally doing another book versus movie adaptation review video. I'm very excited about talking about The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. Read the book, watched the movie. I love them both, and I'm excited to talk about both of them. So, it's Black History Month. I felt like it was a long time coming for me to pick up this book, and it was a perfect fit for Black History Month. So, obviously, I'm eager to jump right into it. So, grab a drink and let's get right into the video. Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel, Scotty Cherie Reads. Quickly, I do want to say that the first half of this, as always, is going to be spoiler free, and then the second half is going to be spoiler filled. I'm going to be talking about the book and the movie on both sections, so you won't miss out on much if you only want the spoiler free section. I'll be talking about both, just not giving spoilers, obviously. So I'm going to jump right into the summary of The Nickel Boys, and I'm going to read exactly what's here on the inside cover. It says, as the civil rights movement begins to reach the Black enclave of Frenchtown and segregated Tallahassee, Elwood Curtis takes the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to heart. He is, quote, as good as any, end quote. Abandoned by his parents, but kept on the straight and narrow by his grandmother. Elwood is a high school senior about to start classes at a local college. But for a Black boy in the Jim Crow South of the early 1960s, one innocent mistake is enough to destroy the future. Elwood is sentenced to a juvenile reformatory called the Nickel Academy, whose mission statement says it provides physical, intellectual, and moral training so that the delinquent boys in their charge can become, quote, honorable and honest men, end quote. In reality, the Nickel Academy is a grotesque chamber of horrors where the sadistic staff beats and sexually abuses the students. Corrupt officials and locals steal food and supplies, and any boy who resists is likely to disappear, quote, out back, end quote. Stunned to find himself in such a vicious environment, Elwood tries to hold on to Dr. King's ringing assertion, quote, throw us in jail and we will still love you, end quote. His friend Turner thinks that Elwood is worse than naive, that the world is crooked, and that the only way to survive is to scheme and avoid trouble. The tension between Elwood's ideals and Turner's skepticism leads to a decision with repercussions that will echo down the decades. Formed in the crucible of the evils Jim Crow wrought, the boys' fate will be determined by what they endured at the Nickel Academy. Based on the real story of a reform school in Florida that operated for 111 years and warped the lives of thousands of children, The Nickel Boys is a devastating driven narrative that showcases a great American novelist writing at the height of his powers. All right, so this book came out in 2019, and I don't know why it took me this long to read it. I learned about the Arthur G. Dozier School for Boys, which is a real reform school that actually didn't close until 2011. Which is crazy. When I realized that, I learned about this actually through one of my favorite books of all time called The Reformatory by Tanana Reeve Dew. If you don't know, on this channel we say Tanana Reeve Dew can do no wrong. So that's another book if you're interested to pick up. But I learned about that school from that book and realized that this was based off of the same reform school in Marianna, Florida. Sorry, I have my notes here as always, just to make sure I stay on track with this video. If you weren't aware, I'll actually have some articles listed below of when they started to like excavate this school and found these mass graves and stuff. It's a really harrowing, real story, but it's an important story to tell, and that's why I decided to pick this book up for Black History Month. I thought it was really important. Obviously, with that subject matter, this is going to be a heavy read, so look at your content warnings, trigger warnings, and make sure you're in a good headspace to read this story. But I think learning about this, even though it's fictional, it still comes from a place of real truth, and it's important to keep, Black folk stories alive, even though they're a lot of the time is tragic. The other thing I want to say before jumping into the non-spoiler filled section of reviewing the book, this is my first Colson Whitehead. He's a pretty pivotal writer. I'm excited to pick up another book. The only other one I own currently that he's written is The Underground Railroad, but I know that he has a lot of other books out there. So if you know my reading taste and you've been watching, let me know like what your favorite Colson Whitehead is below, and like what the next book from like after reading The Nickel Boys I should pick up. All right, so the start of this book, and I mean start like the prologue even before chapter 1, we realize that bones are being dug up, these mass graves are being dug up from the Nickel Academy in this fictional story, the Reform School. And we realized that at this point, because the school's closed now and all of these stories are now being brought back up about how much abuse these boys endured when they were at this Nickel Academy, and that there are a lot of unmarked graves and unknown bodies that are on the property. So it's all under investigation, and we realized that some of the boys who were able to escape or graduated and didn't die in this space in the Nickel Academy get together for like a reunion once a year, but we realized that our main character, Elwood Curtis, hasn't really been going to these reunions and stuff. He lives in New York City, and it's just kind of staying away, but kind of keeping an eye on what's going on in like the news and the websites. But then he realizes that they found this like secret graveyard, and we realized that he's like, okay, now that they found the secret graveyard, I feel like I need to go back and visit. And that's kind of where the prologue ends, and then chapter 1 starts. I did want to say, I love that Colson Whitehead put in here. He talks about how the archaeologists that are like digging up these sites, they're like more interested in pursuing their own career and making a name for themselves than actually like understanding the severity of like what happened to these bodies that they're excavating. And I think that that was such a cool point from the beginning, and it drew me into this story so intensely because I was like, that was a word that does happen. When the Dozier School for Boys in real time, when this was happening in the late 2010s, where they were excavating all of that stuff, it can feel like that sometimes with a lot of the time white archaeologists who are coming in and digging stuff up, whether it be the Dozier School for Boys, which is a real reform school, or like Native American boarding schools that we're finding a bunch of mass graves there. They can take it kind of like selfishly for themselves, and that's not what this story is about. It's about remembering the boys, and if you're on those sites, like, it's important to pay your respects and always know that this is sacred land, you know? Okay, getting into chapter 1, we're following teenage Elwood, who is this really smart, intellectually driven 16-year-old boy who is living with his grandmother because his parents are like no longer in the picture. We'll get into that in the spoiler-filled section. And he's really enamored with Martin Luther King Jr.'s speeches because he's living in the midst of the civil rights era. I mean, this is early 60s, he's 16, you know. He actually has a record from Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech at Zion Hill and just plays that over and over again and, you know, is really into this non-aggressive protesting and just kind of learning about it, coming in to his own as a 16-year-old boy. He has a job, he's saving for college, you know, he's on the up and up, and then basically something happens. I'm not gonna spoil it here, but it's kind of a like wrong place, wrong time situation, and he ends up being sent to the Nickel Academy, which obviously from the moment this happens, you know this is going to be a just crushing story because, I mean, not that any kid deserves to be in this awfully abusive like reform school, but Elwood was doing nothing wrong, you know, like he had his future set, he was on the straight and narrow, and he ended up at this awful spot. So once he's at the Nickel Academy, we're just kind of getting the day-to-day of what's going on in this reform school. We're learning about a lot of the other boys and their backstory. We're learning about how you graduate. So I'm gonna look at my notes really quickly, but you start as a grub when you come in, and then you can move to explorer, and then pioneer, and then finally ace. And once you graduate from ace, then you're finished from this school. But obviously, it's not ultimately gonna be that easy because the school administration is just so corrupt, and basically what's going on is that it's pretty much free labor from these kids. Like, they go out and they farm and do all of these things. It's just free labor. So there's always incentive for the school administration to kind of keep them there as long as they can. So they'll, you know, scold them for just like the littlest things. And yeah, it's not a great situation at all. Yeah, it's funny how they call it like a reform school and how they have in like real life as well, because there's like no reform that's happening. You know, there's no life skills that they're learning aside from just the basicness of just pure survival. Their education is not great. There's not any reform that's happening in terms of like reflecting on what they did to be sent there. Like, it's all just BS, and these kids are just in this awful situation where they're just worked to death, beat. Yeah, they're just trying to survive. And I'm just reminding you, this is not like jail. Like, these are kids who are under the age of 18, like kids. So it's tough. Then ultimately we meet Turner, who is one of our other main characters, and Turner and Elwood just hit it off and they become pretty much inseparable. Even though we learn that like they're a little bit different. Like, Elwood's a lot more optimistic, he's trying to be a part of the civil rights era. He's always trying to lean on the right side of history. His idol is MLKJ. If he sees something, like, he'll say something. Like, he's all about justice. And Turner is a little more skeptical, a little more pessimistic and like realist. But they have a lot of good conversation and banter. And yeah, they're just like the best of friends throughout this story. And it's really fun to read their friendship. It's what propels this story, in my opinion. And then things happen, and the story gets a little heavy, but I feel like that's all that I can say without getting into spoilers for this book. I do want to say, though, that the epilogue tore me up. Tore me up. This book is obviously really sad, but I don't think I shed any tears until I got to the epilogue, and I was bawling. Like, I was bawling through the whole epilogue. So just be prepared for that when you go into this. Even if you think that you might not cry, I'm sure that you probably will at the epilogue. If not sooner. I don't know. I'm surprised I didn't cry beforehand. I think it was just kind of fast paced. I didn't have time to kind of sit in a lot of things that were happening. But yeah, the ending got me good. Overall, I rated this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was incredible. Very fast paced, very captivating. It is a quick read, but it will definitely hit you in the gut, so just know that. And especially because you know that this school that it's based off of, the Dozier School for Boys, was open until 2011. 2011. I like literally can't believe that. Another thing I think this book did really well was explaining how fucked up the world was during the civil rights era. And if you've been on my channel before, you know that what's going on in America right now is really, really messed up and reminds me a lot of what was going on from what I was reading in this book in the 60s. And it just kind of shows how long Black folks have been fighting and how hard it is for, my people to survive and thrive. It was a great book to read during Black History Month. If you haven't picked it up, I definitely recommend it. All right, now let's get into the non-spoiler review of the movie. So there was a movie adaptation that came out in 2024, and I thought it was a masterpiece. I was really surprised when I pulled it up because it's accessible on Amazon Prime, which I do have, so I was able to watch it for free. It is long. It's like 2 hours and 20 minutes, but I was surprised to see that the ratings were so low. It was like a 6 out of 10 star rating, but then after finishing the book, what I took from it is that I think that if you did not read the book first before just going into the movie blind and not knowing much, I think that the movie would have been confusing, and I can understand why you wouldn't have enjoyed it. I think the best way to watch that movie is to read the book and for it to be actively in your brain, because the similarities, like, it follows this story almost to a T. Even in terms of the dialogue that's spoken, it's like verbatim from the book. And it was a really cool experience because I finished this book and then like an hour later I watched the movie, and I think that's the best way to do it, like immediately when it's super fresh in your head. If there's anyone who's watched this and they watched the movie first or without reading the book at all, let me know what you took from the movie. I'd be really interested to know how someone feels about that movie if they hadn't read the book first. I feel like it would be very different from my experience, which was fantastic. This movie is so artistically done. There are so many montage moments that make sense. And I know sometimes people are like, okay, montage, that can be kind of annoying, but the way that the director cut it together to understand the story that you just read, so you don't actually miss like they didn't miss any backstory. Like maybe it wasn't explicitly like spelled out to you in the dialogue, but almost every little scene was shot in a was in there somewhere if you were able to find it. This is a movie that I think you can watch multiple times and find something new and take something new from it, which I'm just so enamored when someone can do that with film in general. This movie is shot in like a first person point of view way the entire way through. So say like I'm Elwood, you would just see like my hands, like the camera would be like my face, and you just see my hands and what I view of the world. And it doesn't just follow Elwood, it follows other characters, but every time we're getting a perspective from someone else's body, it's always that first person POV camera shot, which was just, it makes so much sense for the way this story was told and what happens at the end of this book. Like, what's the director's name? I have it written down because I did not remember. 1 second. The director is Ramel Ross, and the cinematographer is Jomo Frey. They did their big one with this one. Another very intentional move that they did with this movie is that obviously there's a lot of violent acts that happen in this story, like from the book, but it's not gory. And for a lot of the scenes, you don't visibly see the violence on screen. When it comes up to a violent moment, it cuts and you hear like the background noise, but it cuts to like real footage of faces of like the boys from the real Dozier school and civil like footage from the civil rights movement, freedom riders. Like, it was just so beautifully done, and I think that it was just as impactful, or maybe even more so, instead of having the gruesome violence on screen. Like, I wish more movies would think through that a bit more like they did with this movie, because you don't have to see and view the act necessarily to understand the severity and the emotional impact of what's happening. And it was, like I said, it was done so well. I was really surprised because when I started to watch the movie, I like prepared myself because I was like, I know what some of these scenes are like, and like this is going to be really hard to watch, but it wasn't triggering in that regard, even though it was still insanely emotional, if that makes sense. Another thing, going back to the first POV camera shot, it makes it emotional because you feel like you are the character. Like, so you feel like you're Elwood, you feel like you're Turner, you feel like you're whoever that perspective shift is, which draws you in and makes you emotionally tied to these characters in a way that, you know, being just a fly on the wall watching doesn't do. And I think for this type of story, it was imperative, and I'm glad that they shot it that way. It was genius. Going back to the montages a little bit, what's really cool is that there's a lot of like close-up quick scenes, and it kind of shows how the boys in this school have to learn to like view the beauty in the mundane, because their days are just the same over and over and over again. So you see from their perspective of them like taking note of like a spider web, or like a ray of sunshine hitting something in a certain way, or like a flower. And I think that that was just done so well to show the monotony of being in the reform school, and like just it just being so dark and heavy, but these boys are still finding joy, and the tiny little things was really beautiful. So the ending for this movie I felt was a little abrupt, and that's funny because I'm like, it's 2 hours and 20 minutes, but it did wrap up pretty quickly. I would say that I preferred the ending in the book because there was a little more conversation that was had, but overall I really, really enjoyed the movie. I was sad to see the rating, so y'all read the book and go watch it, and hopefully you enjoy it. But I would think that you would, because I think they did a really great job, and you know, give those directors and stuff their flowers, because it was, yeah, it was a good ass adaptation in my opinion. Oh, last thing for this. I did want to say I did cry in the movie. Not as hard as I did in the book, but I think a lot of the tears were coming from the anticipation of knowing what was going to happen. And I think that's also intentional with the way that this movie was shot, is if you already know the story, it really kind of propels you just being like, what's gonna happen next? Like, I know what's gonna happen next. Like, is it gonna happen now? Like, and just feeling that yeah, what happens? I guess I can't really say much. Yeah, I just want to say, even though it's not visually like triggering for the most part, I still cried, and they did a great job of pulling and evoking those emotions from me. Specifically, seeing how young some of these kids are. In the book, it talks about how some of the kids are like 4 and 5 years old, and sometimes it's just because like they're an orphan and like the state didn't know what else to do with them, so they just were sent to this reform school to just like work and like basically rot because they're not learning anything, you know? And like visibly seeing some of these young kids like doing some of this work like got me so hard. Like, yeah, I probably cried the most to just seeing those little kids on screen. All right, so overall, I highly, highly, highly recommend anyone to read The Nickel Boys and then go into the movie. Read the book first and then go into the movie with it still in your brain. It'll be a fantastic experience. I think that it's important for everyone to understand what happened to these poor kids at the real Dozier School for Boys and to keep that story alive, because it's imperative to not erase history as they're trying to do in the States currently and have always been trying to do, honestly. With that being said, we are getting into spoiler territory. So if you do not want to be spoiled for the book or the movie, adios. I'll see you in my next video. Leave a comment down below and let's chat there. But all right, as dead. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. Let's get right into it. All right, so just so you're aware, the way that I have this structured is we're gonna go through the book top to bottom pretty much for significant points, things that stuck out to me, and then we're gonna get into common themes that I saw and wanted to talk about, specific characters that I wanted to talk about. And then we'll get into what I enjoyed a lot from the movie in terms of like plot and just getting more into the nitty gritty. And then we're going to talk about the differences of the book versus the movie. And yeah, so let's just get right into the beginning, where this theme of like Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech at Zion Hill, he has this album, he as an Elwood, has this album and plays this all the time. And I really liked that throughout this book, there are quotes from MLKJ's teachings and how they are there for Elwood all the time, but you can see as he's in this reform school and he's seeing the injustice of a lot of things that are happening, he starts to question some of it. And I just felt him so hard because I feel that same way right now, you know? When is nonviolence, is that always the answer? Is violence ever necessary? You know, how much can we take? I'm going to read a passage here. It's on page 172, and it starts with the words of MLK. It says, "Throw us in jail and we will still love you. Bomb our homes and threaten our children, and as difficult as it is, we will still love you. Send your hooded perpetrators of violence into our communities after midnight hours and drag us out some wayward road and beat us and leave us half dead, and we will still love you. But be ye assured that we will wear you down by our capacity to suffer, and one day we will win our freedom." The capacity to suffer, Elwood, all the Nickel Boys, existed in the capacity, breathed in it, ate in it, dreamed in it. That was their lives now. Otherwise, they would have perished. The beatings, the rapes, the unrelenting winnowing of themselves, they endured. But to love those who would have destroyed them, to make that leap, we will meet your physical force with soul force, do to us what you will, and we will still love you. Elwood shook his head. What a thing to ask. What an impossible thing. That right there hit me so hard because I feel that same way. And obviously I'm not promoting violence, but you know, to turn the other cheek all the time is an impossible ask, for real. So what I learned is that I need to go listen to these MLK speeches again. I mean, I have done it like in high school and stuff, but it's been a while and I need to revisit that stuff stat. Okay, so getting into the actual story, we're gonna talk about Elwood, the sweet, intellectual 16-year-old who lives with his grandmother, Harriet. And we learned that Elwood's mother and father leave. They like flee to California to basically chase their own dreams, and they just left Elwood with his grandma. So Harriet, that's her name, she's raised Elwood, and they have a pretty close bond. Harriet works at this hotel, and Elwood, goes to work with her since he's a young boy, and he spends a lot of his time in the kitchen with a lot of the like black males that are back there, and he just loved his time there. They taught him a lot about life and just experiences, and like he had just like a lot of fun growing up. He's always been a great kid on the straight and narrow. Eventually, he grows up and he gets his own job working for Mr. Marconi at his tobacco and cigar shop. But there's also like a corner store situation that has like penny candies and stuff for kids and like magazines up front. And Elwood is an exceptional worker there in his teenage years and is very consistent there. He's such a great worker that Mr. McConey has like told him that, like sometimes the kids are gonna come in and steal stuff once in a while, but like it's just part of business and you don't really have to worry about it. But after a year of working there and Elwood is seeing this happen frequently, he just at some point has to speak up because it just feels so like unjust to him. And a couple of his peers come in and they're stealing, and he basically confronts them and is like, put that back. And it's just on his own accord. And he ultimately gets jumped for that. But it's just showing Elwood's personality trait and how justice is so important for him and honesty is so important to him. Elwood also excels at school, and he's just such a great student. And then we meet a character named Mr. Hill, who is his new high school teacher. Elwood's in his senior year of school, and they learned that Mr. Hill has actually been very active in the civil rights movement, and Elwood's so drawn to that. A lot of the students are really drawn to it. And a noticeable thing that happens, which I had never thought about before, and it broke my heart, but they were explaining that because the schools are still segregated, the black kids don't get like new textbooks. They get like the hand-me-down used textbook from the white high school. And because the white students know that, they just tear the books up and like write so many like racial slurs and stuff in them. And when I was reading that, I was like, I don't know why I never really thought about that, but that would just be so rough. And Mr. Hill, just like, when you're trying to study and you're just seeing slurs and terrible pictures and the N-word just everywhere, it would distract you from your studies. And Mr. Hill was the first teacher ever that when he gets in there, he hands out a black marker to everyone. And during their first period, their first day of school, he has them go through and mark out every single slur or negative thing that a white student wrote in these books so that they can actually pay attention in class. And that just meant a lot to Elwood and the students. And the movie did a really good job of that because they actually showed a flip book? Like in Elwood's book, it was a flip book where you flip the pages and there's like a picture that's moving, and it was like of a lynching. And like shit like that actually happened. I don't know why I never really thought about it, but I really liked that scene. It really spoke to me. So Mr. Hill takes notice of Elwood and eventually is like, hey, I have a college friend or a college teaching friend who's here in town at the college called Melvin Griggs, I believe that's what it's called. And he's bringing up this free college summer program and wants Elwood to go. So obviously Elwood's like, hell yeah, this is awesome, So Elwood agrees, it's free, his grandmother Harriet is very excited about it. And what happens is that eventually, summer comes around and he is riding his bike to his first class at the Melvin Griggs College, and his bike is still messed up from when he got jumped back in the day, when his peers were upset that they ratted on them for cheating. And his chain pops or his bike breaks as he's on his way, and there's a Plymouth that comes up and there's a black man that's in it, and he jumps in. He's like, yeah, take me to Melvin Griggs. And he's like, sure, I'll catch you a ride. But little does he know is that car is hot, and the person or stranger that he was in the car with stole it, and the cops obviously pull him over, and they get arrested. I mean, I guess we don't really know what happened to the stranger, but Elwood gets arrested and is sent to the reform school, the Nickel Academy, which is just so sad because he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, literally on his way to his college classes, and he is then sent to this terrible reform school. All right, so then Elwood gets to the school and he's just kind of just trying to figure shit out, you know. Never expected that he was going to be here, but he is and he can't really do anything about it, so he's just figuring out the ropes. And this is when we learn about Turner, who is the other main character, and they meet in the lunchroom and they're just like best buds from then on. They just kind of lock in with each other, and yeah, we just follow them throughout the rest of the story. So moving forward a little bit, then Elwood gets himself in trouble for the first time, and what happened is that a couple of the big bullies were beating up a kid in the bathroom, and or at least that's what he thought he saw, but he chooses to step in, he gets sucker punched, and the like superintendent or the person who overseeing their dormitory, I think his name is Mr. Blakely, sees them and he doesn't care what the story was here. Like, they're all in trouble and they're told that they are going to be punished by Mr. Spencer, who's like the principal of or superintendent of this school, and they know that they are going to get beat in the place called the White House, and they know it's going to be pretty terrible. So then Elwood is kind of counting down to when they're going to grab him, and they always grab you in the middle of the night, and they do, and they beat him so badly that he passes out and wakes up like in the hospital, and he ends up staying in the hospital for weeks. I just needed to mention it here again that the film showed this scene in such a beautiful way in terms of like we don't see the actual like strap that they call Black Beauty like coming down or anything. We just see from Elwood's perspective, he watches like all of the other boys go first because he's last, and he actually like falls asleep and it goes dark, and then he opens his eyes and you can hear him just like breathing so heavily and walking in and seeing what it looks like. And then as soon as that hit happens, instead of watching it happen on screen, we see flashes of the real faces of the boys from the Dozier school, and you know, not great. Like, they're not smiling. Some of them are obviously in pain, and yeah, it was just it was done. It was done so well. That was one of my, I don't know if you want to say favorite scenes, but it was really, really powerful. All right, so Elwood is in the hospital for a couple weeks, and after about 1 week, Turner shows up, and they start talking, and we realize that Turner like intentionally ate soap powder in order to make himself sick so that he could kind of get out of work for a little bit, and probably just to spend some time with Elwood, which was super sweet. And you know, they're just gabbing and cracking jokes and stuff and just having a good time. And this is the first time that we realize how sinister like this school is, because Turner is like, you know, you're lucky. And Elwood's like, what do you mean? Like, I can hardly walk. And he was like, well, you didn't like go out back, you know, you didn't actually die. And he explains how sometimes if they say they're going to take you out back, then the kids just never see that boy again. And they tell their families that they just ran away, when in reality, they murdered them and put them in those secret graves. Here's a passage here on page 81 that I want to read. This is Turner talking. He said, your family asked the school what happened and they say you ran away, Turner said. He made sure the white boys weren't looking. Problem was, Elwood, he said, you didn't know how it works. Take Corey and those two cats. You wanted to do some Lone Ranger shit. Run up and save a N-word. But they punked him out a long time ago. See, those three do that all the time. Corey likes it. They play rough, and then he takes them into the stall or whatever and gets on his knees. That's how they do it. I saw his face. He was scared, Elwood said. He said, you don't know what makes him tick, Turner said. You don't know what makes anybody tick. I used to think out there is out there, and then once you're in here, you're in here. That everybody in Nickel was different because of what being here does to you. Spencer and them too. Maybe out there in the free world, they're good people, smiling, nice to their kids. His mouth quenched up like he was sucking on a rotten tooth. But now that I've been out and I've been brought back, I know there's nothing in here that changes people. In here and out there are the same, but in here, no one has to act fake anymore. So I really liked that quote, and we really see like Turner's perspective and how it's a bit different from Elwood. Yeah, I just wanted to read that really quickly. All right, so when Elwood is released from the hospital, he just goes back to his normal day to day. And before, he was just kind of like on the farm, like picking potatoes or oranges and things like that. But then one day, Turner shows up and he's like, hey, he talks to Mr. Blakely, who is the person who is in charge of the boys in the field, or the black boys in the field. And it's like, hey, he is getting removed from this work and coming to the community service with me and Harper. And Harper is another white guy who works at the school. And we learn that this community service is, when they leave, they go into town with Harper and they take all of these supplies from the school and like low key sell them to different businesses and stuff for the low, and they get paid under the table. So they're taking like the peaches that the kids should be eating and like the good quality food they should be eating, like notebooks, school books, just a bunch of different supplies that they're just taking from these kids to sell to get money under the table. And Elwood realizes that this is just so unjust, and he decides to, well, secretly, even Turner doesn't know this at this point, that he is going to log everything, every transaction, every name, every business, every establishment that was a part of this, and maybe end up being, a whistleblower. So yeah, it just shows Elwood's character of just trying to do the right thing all the time. And he believes that like, if he has this information, that someone else is going to care and that he can potentially get this school shut down. Oh, another thing that they do for community service is that they also just get hired out to like paint people's houses and do housework for other people in terms of like free labor, which obviously is not what these boys are supposed to be doing, but they're doing it anyway in terms of favors for people, in the town. And it's just, yeah, disgusting just to see how corrupt this school is. Okay, we're gonna switch gears a little bit and we're gonna talk about Griff. Griff is like the main bully at this school, and he's basically chosen to be the black kid who represents the black ward on the Nickel Academy for this annual like boxing match that happens. And this boxing match is huge because a lot of people come in and bet. People all over the city come in and they're just kind of rooting for this black versus white student boxing fight. And Griff is going to be the person who represents the black population. So Turner overhears that Mr. Spencer pulled Griffin secretly somewhere and basically was like, you're not going to win this fight. And if you do win this fight, like, I'm taking you out back. And, Turner kind of expected that, but Elwood is just like so flabbergasted and just like so distraught over the injustice of this. And it really, really, really bothers him. Fast forward, we get to the fight itself, and, first round's going, second round's going. Griff is still getting his punches in, he's doing his thing because he's not just gonna go in there and let everyone know that he's faking it. But ultimately, Griff wins. And it's almost like he was in his own head while he was fighting, like everyone else was, and he just lost track of time. It also says that Griff just isn't really a smart person, and we realize that he wins, and immediately, he looks at Mr. Spencer and is like, I thought it was the second round. Like, I didn't know it was the third round. And that just hit me in the book and in the movie. The movie did a good job of transferring this on screen and just knowing what this means for Griff and him understanding. And the only people who knew that it was rigged really was Turner and Elwood. And for them to see this happen and knowing what's going to happen to him was just devastating. And of course, they do grab Griff in the middle of the night, and the boys never hear from him again. I want to read a passage here on page 112. It says, Elwood frowned in disdain at the whole performance, which made Turner smile. The fight was as rigged and rotten as the dishwashing races he told Turner about, another gear in the machine that kept black folks down. Turner enjoyed his friend's new bend towards cynicism, even as he found himself swayed by the magic of the big fight. Seeing Griff, their enemy and champion, put a hurting on that white boy made a fellow feel all right, in spite of himself. Now that the third and final round was upon them, he wanted to hold on to that feeling. It was real, in their blood and minds, even if it was a lie. Turner was certain Griff was going to win, even though he knew he wasn't. Turner was a mark after all, another sucker, but he didn't care. Yeah, that was a good passage. And then I want to read on page 114. It says, getting hit in the head can rattle your brains. Getting hit in the head like that can make you addle-minded and confused. Turner never thought it'd make you forget 2 plus 1. But Griff had never been good at arithmetic, he supposed. And then it says, when the state of Florida dug him up 15, they're talking about Griff. When the state of Florida dug him up 50 years later, the forensics examiner noted the fractures in the wrist and speculated that he'd been restrained before he died. In addition to the other violence attested by the broken bones. Most of those who know the story of the rings and the trees are dead by now. The iron is still there, rusty, deep in the heartwood, testifying to anyone who cares to listen. So, yeah, I don't know if I've mentioned this, but when they talk about taking him out back, Turner actually shows Elwood a spot in the woods where there are these big metal hoops that are attached to 2 trees that are next to each other, and you can just see that as they're getting whipped to death, basically, or whatever happens out there, there's no way they can run away or get out. They're gonna break their bones beforehand, and in the movie with seeing that the rings, I cried. It was tough. Okay, getting back to the overall summary through Elwood. So one day, Elwood, like after the fight and stuff, Elwood and Turner are out with Harper for this community service thing, and Harper's off doing something, and they're just kind of talking, and Turner, they kind of talk about like the option of like running away and like how Turner would do it. And I want to just read what he said here. Elwood asked, how would you do it? Turner had turned it over in his head many times, but had never shared it with anyone. You head out here into the free world, not the swamp. Snatch clothes from the clotheslines. Head south, not north, because they aren't expecting it. Those empty houses we pass on our deliveries? Mr. Tolliver's house. He's always down at the Capitol for business. His house is empty. We raid them for supplies and then put as many miles between you and the dogs as you can, tire them out. The trick is not doing what they know you're going to do. Then he remembered the most important part. And don't take no one with you. Not one of those dummies. They'll take you down with them. We'll get to that in a little bit, but that is an important quote from this moment that's shared. And then the book moves to part 3, and we start part 3 with Elwood, who is an adult, and he is living in New York City and just kind of figuring his stuff out, and he's trying to open a moving company. And I just wanted to bring up this page on page 143, or this quote on page 143. It's like, he decided to call his company Ace Moving. AAA was taken, and he wanted to be at the top of the phone book. It was 6 months before he realized he picked the name from his time at Nickel. Ace, out in the free world to make your zigzag way. So if you don't remember, Ace is the top level before you graduate the reform school, and I thought it was just a sweet quote. Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to put that in there. All right, and then Elwood and Turner are talking, and they're understanding that there's only like 4 ways to get out of the Nickel Academy. So one is to graduate. Like I said, if you become Ace, you work your way up, you'll graduate. You can be murdered, which happened to Griff. Once in a while, there's court intervention, but that like never ever happens, or you can run away. And, you know, after they're having this conversation, eventually Elwood tells Turner what his plan is. And he's like, I actually have a plan number 5. And that is, I've been logging all of this stuff, and I just want to be a whistleblower because I have faith that someone else will shut this school down. It's like we just tear the school down. And Turner is actually kind of upset about hearing this because he trusted Elwood and just doesn't want to rock the ship, because I think Turner understands the injustice of the world and that no one's gonna care, or the punishment for them doing this can be their lives, you know? I want to read a quote here on the bottom of page 174 to 175. It says, more distressing than the notion that the newspaper didn't care about what was going on at Nickel was that they received so many letters like it, so many appeals, that they couldn't address them all. The country was big and its appetite for prejudice and depredation limitless. How could they keep up with the host of injustices, big and small? This was just one place. A lunch counter in New Orleans, a public pool in Baltimore that they filled with concrete rather than allow black kids to dip a toe into it. This was one place, but if there was one, there were hundreds and hundreds of nickels and white houses scattered across the land like pain factories. Which is just sad to realize that, there's just so many other atrocities that are happening. Why would the newspaper care about us? We're just going to, get ourselves into trouble or get ourselves killed. Then it continues, he had to trust a stranger to do the right thing. It was impossible, like loving the one who wanted to destroy you. But that was the message of the movement, to try in the ultimate decency that lived in every human heart. So that just kills me because Elwood is still just having faith that someone will pay attention to them, someone will care about the injustices that are happening to black people all over the world, but specifically at this Nickel Academy. He's just holding on to that belief that someone has to have a good heart and that it's worth him being the whistleblower because he hopes that whatever stranger finds, his notebook will do something. So then the boys learn that there's a state inspection that's happening. So they get all the kids, all the boys to clean everything up. And on the day of the inspection, Elwood's this is my moment. I can drop this notebook to one of these people and I have faith and I hope that they will see it and shut this place down. However, he's really nervous as the day is going by. And during this time leading up to it, Turner and Elwood aren't really talking because Turner was pretty upset about hearing that Elwood was planning on doing this whole time. Yeah, so it's an interesting scene where all of the great food is magically back and the boys are just yeah, we get peaches. This is the best breakfast we've ever had. They need to come and inspect this place all the time. They got ice cream and stuff. Note the ice cream. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But ultimately, Turner is paying attention to Elwood and realizes that Elwood is being very sheepish and doesn't want to hand this notebook over. And he's just, he really wants to, but he hasn't figured out a way to do it. And Turner kind of comes back and is hey, just give me the notebook and I'll give it to someone else. And it's almost like a truce between them. And so Elwood does give him the notebook and Turner turns it in. And then ultimately they're found out. We don't really I don't think that we get a major explanation as to what happened, but a couple of days had passed, but then eventually Elwood's grabbed from his bed at night and he goes to the White House and he gets beat, not as bad as before, but then they throw him in the sweat box. And if you don't know what a sweat box is, it is a box that is high up in an attic. And think about this in the summer heat in the South with it's humid. And they just don't give you water, they don't give you food, and you're just in complete isolation, sweating your ass off, and pretty much just dying in this sweat box. And that's where Elwood is for days. And Turner somehow overhears that Mr. Spencer and them are planning on, taking him out back the next day. So in the middle of the night, Turner goes up, he frees Elwood, and Elwood is in terrible, terrible shape, but they try to make their escape. And the word is try because they get pretty far. They're pretty smart. They grab bikes from some of the houses and supplies from some of the houses they were working on and some that they knew were going to be empty. And they get pretty far. But then out of all people, Harpy, who was their white supervisor who they would go out into the world with, and it seemed like they kind of had a little bit of a bond there, hunts them down, and Turner gets further out and Elwood just can't keep up, and Harper takes out his shotgun and shoots Elwood. And if you're wait, what? And you're just listening to the spoilers because you haven't read the book, that is the twist that I was not expecting from this book. Because obviously, as I've mentioned, we get clips of Elwood in the future who's living in New York City, starting this moving business and trying to figure out his life. But we realize that Turner actually is the one who survived and just used Elwood's identity for the rest of his life in order to protect himself, because obviously he was going to be hunted. I just want to read part of that twist here. It's on page 202, and this is at the epilogue. So this happens at the very end of the book when I literally dropped the book when I realized what happened because I don't know if I'm dumb, but I did not see that coming at all. We realized that Elwood, or who's Turner, is in a diner, and it says when the owner of the diner asked him his name 2 weeks out of Nickel, he said Elwood Curtis. First thing that popped into his head. It felt right. He used the name from then on when anybody asked to honor his friend, to live for him. I dropped my book so fast, and yeah, that was so powerful, and I just broke down crying. Like I said earlier, I didn't end up crying throughout this book, but that's like right on the first page of the epilogue. And from that moment on, I was a mess until the end of the book, like literally buckets just going. So then the very end of this book is basically Elwood slash Turner traveling down and ends up in Tallahassee because he is on his way to the Nickel Academy now that it has finally been shut down, and they found this secret grave, and it's just important for him to go like pay his respects to Elwood, who died, and he can kind of tell his story finally now that he feels safe because these stories are coming out and it's important for him to do that. So I want to now get into like themes of what I picked up and important plot points or like through lines that I see throughout this book. And to start, I want to start right here at the end of this book when he's in Tallahassee, when Turner slash Elwood is in Tallahassee, because he ends up at the Richmond Hotel. Which, if you don't remember, the Richmond Hotel is the hotel that Elwood's grandmother Harriet worked at, that he kind of grew up in the kitchen with the black workers back there. And I just wanted to read on page 18. It said, Elwood asked his grandmother when Negroes were going to start staying at the Richmond. Okay, so let me give backstory. What is it? Oh my God. Brown versus Board of Education, which allowed schools to desegregate, just happened. Like the decision was made that morning. So Elwood asked his grandmother when Negroes were going to start staying at the Richmond. And she said, it's one thing to tell someone to do what's right and another thing for them to do it. She listed some of his behavior as proof, and Elwood nodded, maybe so. Sooner or later, though, the door would swing wide to reveal a brown face, a dapper businessman in Tallahassee for business, or a fancy lady in town to see the sights, enjoying the fine-smelling fare the cooks put on. He was sure of it. The game began when he was 9, and 3 years later, the only colored person he saw in the dining room carried plates or drinks or a mop. He never stopped playing, up until his afternoons at the Richmond ended. Whether his opponent in this game was his own foolishness or the mullen consistency of the world was unclear. So you see the hope of Elwood just being like, I just want to see a black customer like in this restaurant. And he's saying that like 3 years after it was allowed, there still wasn't a black person that came in. But then the ending of this book, it says that, I'm going to say Turner slash Elwood, gets to Tallahassee and he is in this restaurant named Blondie's, right? And it says, formerly the Richmond Hotel. It was a Tallahassee landmark, and great care, they said, had gone into preserving the spirit of the grand old establishment. The shop by reception sold postcards. If he had been less tired, he might have recognized the name from a story he had once heard when he was young, about a boy who liked to read adventure stories in the kitchen, but it eluded him. He was hungry and they served all day, and that was enough. Ooh, it almost got me. But that is how the book ends. So it's just very full circle, and to see that there's a black man with Elwood's name who is eating there was just so well done by Colson Whitehead. All right, now I want to talk about Funtown, which is talked about, that Martin Luther King Jr. talks about in his speeches about this amusement park that black kids couldn't go and visit, but they could obviously see it, and they saw all of the fun, and heard all the fun, and would see all the advertisements, but they were never able to go. And MLK talks about how he had to talk to his daughter and explain that she wasn't allowed to go, but it wasn't for anything that she did wrong. and that she's just as valid and beautiful and important as the kids who are able to go. And that story just breaks my heart. I just can't imagine living through that time and like having a kid and having to explain those differences to a child. Like, my God. But I have a quote here that I want to read. It's on page 12. And Elwood, as a child, like most kids, if they're close to this amusement park, just has hope that one day he's gonna be able to go. Ooh, I feel like this is gonna make me cry. He's talking about a commercial that he hears, and this is him as a kid, you know? A perfect report card guaranteed free admission, the commercial said, if your teacher stamped a red mark on it. Elwood got all A's and kept his stack of evidence for the day they opened Funtown to all God's children, as Dr. King promised. Oof, this part gets me every time. I'll get in free every day for a month easy, he told his grandmother, lying on the front room rug, oof, and tracing the threadbare patch with his thumb. So, yeah, hold on, let me come back. Okay, I'm gonna try to keep it together, but that Funtown, like, amusement park situation just always gets me. It gets me when I hear MLK talk about it, and then Colson Whitehead tore me up even more, not only just from that, but we come back to this when when Elwood is actually Elwood and he's in the Nickel Academy. And basically they are setting up all these lights and stuff at the reformatory for Christmas time. And it says, those are some lights, Turner said. Past the White House, blinking lights outlined the old water tower. One of the white kids had fallen from the ladder while nailing them up and had broken his collarbone. The lights floated on the X's on the wooden struts, circled the huge tank, sketched the triangular peak, like a spaceship taking off. It reminded Turner of something. Then it came to him. That amusement park, Funtown, from the TV commercials. That dumb, happy music, the bumper cars and the roller coaster and the atomic rocket. The other boys talked about the place from time to time. They'd go there when they were out in the free world again. Turner thought that was stupid. They didn't let colored people in those nice places. But there it was before him, pointed at the stars, decked in 100 flickering lights waiting for a takeoff, a rocket, launched in darkness toward another dark planet they couldn't see. It looks nice, Turner said. We did a good job, Elwood said. So, yeah, it's just, it's the closest that Elwood ever got, He didn't even make it alive out of the Nickel Academy. And just to see that even, like, Turner had a fascination. Like, we saw that Elwood dreamt about going to Funtown, but we also see here that Turner also dreamt of that. And it's just a common theme for Black children, which is just so sad because it was real, like, it breaks my heart. Okay, enough about Funtown, because I'm gonna break down for a minute, but I'm better. Let's talk about Jamie. So Jamie is a Mexican boy who is in this reform school, and I love that Colson Whitehead made this person a character because we see how Jamie goes back and forth between the Black side of the school and the white side of the school because they can't decide where he belongs. And it just triples down on like how ridiculous just these racial divides in our lives are. Like, it was funny because there's a scene, and they did a really good job in the movie with this, where at the boxing match, Jamie's sitting with the Black kids, but sometimes like the mayor and stuff will be like, they'll see a pale face in a sea of brown faces or Black faces, and we'll be like, we can't have that. Like, he needs to match the pale boys. But then like or the white boys, so he needs to move over and sit with the white folk. But it talks, like, Colson Whitehead explains how, like, in the summer when he's outside and he has a tan, then like eventually he's gonna be back to the Black side. But then when that tan fades and he goes to the white side, and it was done so well. All right, page 61 talks about this. It says, their leader was a quiet-natured boy named Jamie, who had the spindly, undernourished frame common to Nickel students. He bounced around Nickel a lot. His mother was Mexican, so they didn't know what to do with him. On his arrival, he was put in with the white kids, but his first day working in the lime fields, he got so dark that Spencer had him reassigned to the colored half. Jamie spent a month in Cleveland, but then director Hardy toured one day, took a look at that light face among the dark faces, and had him sent back to the white camp. Spencer bided his time and tossed him back a few months later. I go back and forth, Jamie said as he racked up pine needles into a mound. He had the screwed down smile of the rickety tooth. One day they'll make up their minds, I suppose. Which, yeah, that little character of Jamie just said so much about what race even means. Next, we're going to talk about Harriet, the grandmother, and her character broke my heart because from her backstory we learned that like she's never had any proper goodbyes for like anyone that's proper in her life, and it's really, really sad. So I'm gonna read a bit of her backstory here on page 70. It says, rarely did Harriet make proper goodbyes to her loved ones. Her father died in jail after a white lady downtown accused him of not getting out of her way on the sidewalk. Bumptious contact, as Jim Crow defined it. That's how it went in the old days. He was waiting for his appointment with the judge when he was found hung in his cell. No one believed the police story. N-words in jail, her uncle said. N-words in jail. 2 days prior, Harriet had waved to him across the street on her way home from school. That was her last image of him. Her big, cheerful daddy walking to his second job. Harriet's husband, Monty, got hit in the head with a chair while breaking up a scuffle at Miss Simone's. Some colored GIs from Camp Gordon Johnston and a rumble with the bunch of the Tallahassee crackers over who had next on the pool table. 2 people ended up dead. One of them was her Monty, who stepped up to protect one of Simone's dishwashers from 3 white men. The boy still wrote Harriet letters every Christmas. He drove a taxi cab in Orlando and had 3 kids. She said goodbye to her daughter, Evelyn, and her son-in-law, Percy, the night they took off. Percy's was one leave taking in the works for years, although she hadn't foreseen that he'd take Evelyn. Percy had been too big for the town since he got back from the war. He served in the Pacific Theater, behind the lines keeping up the supply chain. Yeah, like it's just sad. And then obviously she never had a true goodbye for Elwood before he died, and that just was her last straw. In the movie, there's a change, which we'll get into the specific changes of the movie in a little bit, but in the movie they do show Turner, like, after he's escaped, he does make a trip back to Elwood's house to meet Harriet, and you can just see her just like breaking down and understanding that Elwood died. But ultimately in the book, which is a lot more realistic, I think, is that she probably never got an answer as to what happened to Elwood until she died, which is just so heartbreaking, because that's the case for so many people. And some of the articles down below, you can just see that these people had waited so long to understand, like, what happened. They didn't know if the kids actually ran away. They didn't know if they drowned in the swamp trying to get out, if they were murdered. Harriet basically died in the book not knowing what happened to Elwood. And it's just, it's sad as hell. Next up, we're going to talk about ice cream and how this keeps popping up throughout the story. So the first time we get the significance of ice cream is on page 66, where they're talking about the White House. So it said, the white boys bruised differently than the black boys and called it the ice cream factory because you came out with bruises of every color. The black boys called it the White House because that was the official name and it fit and it didn't need to be embellished. The White House delivered the law and everybody obeyed. Not only are we talking about ice cream, I think the significance of ice cream is the joy that kids have when eating ice cream, and just the aversion to ice cream that we see in this book is so well done by Colson Whitehead. So obviously he's explaining that the white boys called it the ice cream factory because they get beat so bad that they turn just black and blue, and they bruise in every color. And then we're gonna go to page 124, where Turner is talking about his aversion to ice cream specifically. Or Elwood's aversion was understandable, which it's because he's been to the White House and they also call it the ice cream factory, so he's just like, I don't like to think about it. Yeah, the visit to the ice cream factory had left its marks. Turner hated this stuff on account of his aunt's boyfriend, who moved in with them when Turner was 11 years old. So I'm not going to read this whole page, but it's telling the whole history of Turner, and Turner's mom was an alcoholic, and there's a line where he basically says, like, I know my mom loved me, but she just loved alcohol more, which hits, and she died by the bottle. So his aunt pretty much raised him, but his aunt had this boyfriend who would just beat her. His name was Ishmael. He was able to understand that Ishmael was like beating his aunt slowly but surely, but then he would say Ishmael would basically take him out to get ice cream to kind of soften the craziness that was happening in the house. He said, he ate every miserable spoonful, and ever since it struck him that adults are always trying to buy off children to make them forget their bad actions. Had the flavor of that fact in his mouth when he ran from his aunt's home that last time. Nickel served the students vanilla ice cream once a month, and it made them so squealingly happy, like a bunch of dumb piglets in a sty, that Turner wanted to knock everyone flat. So yeah, you just see here that he just has the aversion of like, ice cream's not gonna heal what I hear and see that you're doing to my aunt. And that's exactly what the administration was doing with these kids when they give them ice cream once a month to kind of bribe them and, you know, make them feel like everything's okay when everything isn't. And I think, yeah, Colson Whitehead hit that theme or that symbol on the head. Like, I really needed to talk about that. All right, the last thing I want to talk about before I talk about what I liked about the movie and the differences about the movie, I just want to talk about the general aftermath of these nickel boys who did survive or escaped and could grow into adulthood, hopefully. And obviously there's so much trauma that, as I explained before, that a lot of these boys would just end up in the Vietnam War because there was some sense of structure, and obviously they might not make it out of war, and war just adds even more trauma. So like these kids are just always messed up, you know, even into adulthood. And there's a quote on page 166. It said, "If things had been different, the boys could have been many things had they not been ruined by that place. Doctors who cure diseases or perform brain surgery, inventing shit that saves lives, run for president, all those lost geniuses. Sure, not all of them were geniuses. Chicky Pete, for example, was not solving special relativity, but they had been denied even the simple pleasure of being ordinary, hobbled and handicapped before the race even began, never figuring out how to be normal." We're just gonna leave it at that because Colson Whitehead said it better than I ever could even explain. You get it. And it's so, so sad. We're almost wrapped up. Thanks for being here with me. But I just want to go over the differences that I happened to catch in the movie from the book. And I have my notes here just to make sure I don't forget anything. So the movie starts off pretty quickly with Elwood getting arrested. Like I said, you get glimpses of all of the stuff beforehand, but the movie doesn't really talk about or go into extreme detail about his upbringing. And I think that you miss that if you haven't read the book. They just give like clips of his life growing up. And yeah, it was just different because the book actually starts, it tells quite a bit about him growing up. So that was just a slight difference. Also, in the movie, you see this like photo booth image of young Elwood with this girl. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember him having a girlfriend or like any romantic relationship in that regard. But it was really sad because it flashed again at the end and just kind of showed that like whatever spark was there that they kind of put in the movie, probably just for like romance to enhance the plot and to make you feel even more so in the film space, was just that, you know, he had a little girlfriend or something and just like would never see that through, you know, because his life was cut short. And I liked that little add-in. It wasn't a full plot thread or anything, but even just seeing the little image at the beginning and the end just really hit hard for me. There's another significant difference that happened, or not significance, but I really like this scene that happened in the movie. It's when Elwood had gone to the White House and had gotten beaten so bad that he was in the hospital. And during that time, Harriet, his grandmother, comes to give him a visit, but they turn Harriet away and they basically say like he's sick and they don't like give any explanation for it. I believe that happened in the book, but what didn't happen that they did show in the movie that I really liked is that we're from Turner's perspective and Turner's just wandering around campus and Harriet comes up to him and was like, hey, do you know who Elwood Curtis is? And Turner's like, yeah. And he's like, and they meet and Harriet's like, you know, I'm not able to see him because I said he's sick, but like I have a package for him. Can you please give it to him? And she's just like, what the hell do they have going on here? Like, I can't believe I can't see him. This is just so unjust. And she asks if she can give him a hug so that he can like transfer that hug to Elwood, and just saying she came here to hug her grandson and wasn't able to. So she gives Turner not one hug, but two. And I thought that moment was so powerful. And then, as I said, another difference in the movie is that at the end, he goes back to Harriet's house to let her know that Elwood didn't make it. And that through line, I think, was a little bit different, but it made sense in the movie, and I liked that ad. A big thing that was omitted from the movie, but I think that it was okay, because I don't even really feel like it was really that necessary in the book, is the poisoning of Earl. So Earl was one, it's basically Mr. Spencer, who's a superintendent, like his right-hand man, a white man, and Desmond, who's one of the boys at the school, comes back and he finds this like horse medicine, and he lets some of the boys know, and and they all kind of joke, and they're like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if we just like poisoned someone? And they all kind of talk, and they give up names of who they would want to give this medicine to make them sick. They don't think that it's like poison that's gonna kill him, which it doesn't actually kill him, but it does make him very, very sick. They think it's just gonna be a joke to make him, throw up or whatever. But Jamie, we talked about Jamie, it keeps being like Earl. It has to be Earl, it has to be Earl. And we don't actually get on page why he's so adamant to hurt Earl, but we can understand that there's probably some sexual things that are going on when he is on the white side and not on the black side with Earl specifically, because they do talk about sexual abuse being a very heavy thing in this school. They actually call it Lover's Lane, and it's just disgusting. But ultimately, they all kind of chicken out, and they realize that there's this holiday luncheon where people from town come in and the boys like serve them, and Jamie's like, this is my opportunity to do it. And he doesn't actually tell any of the boys that he's actually gonna do it, but he does poison him. And Earl throws up, he's throwing up blood, and is taken to the hospital, and then like he never returns. And that's pretty much it. And then there's another guy who takes the spot who's actually worse than Earl was, and maybe that's the point, to say that like, you can't really get rid of one of them because something else that's bigger and badder will end up coming in, so they're just kind of trapped. But that scene wasn't in the movie whatsoever. Another part that's not in the movie that is in the book is the story of Clayton Smith, who is one of the most well-known runaways from the Nickel Academy. And the teachers and stuff at the school tell his story because ultimately he was caught and killed and murdered and is in one of those graves in the back to basically tell the kids that, if you run away, you're going to be found. So like, don't even do it. But that story of Clayton Smith, I don't think was in the movie at all. All right. And then the last thing is that in the book, Turner/Elwood decides to take a trip to the Nickel Academy at the very end because they find this secret grave, and he knows that the real Elwood is there, and because the school has been closed for a while, he feels safe to now tell their story. And we meet this person named Millie, who ultimately becomes his wife, and there's a scene where he explains all of this to Millie and basically tells him that like his name isn't Elwood, his name is actually Turner, it's James Turner, and how they work through this. And that wasn't really in the movie at all. It seemed like we do see Millie in the movie, but it seems like Millie knows everything about Turner as Turner and is trying to push him to kind of go down to the school to kind of grieve and to move on and to tell Elwood's story. So that was just a little bit different. And as I said, the movie ends pretty abruptly versus the ending of the book. All right, we have another long one here, but I'm excited to be back doing a book versus movie adaptation. These are very fun. I like doing a deep analysis, if you guys can't tell. Obviously, I very much recommend this. I think it's perfect for Black History Month. Let me know down below if you've read it, how you felt about the movie, if you've watched it, all of the thoughts about the Nickel Boys. As always, if you like what you saw here, please subscribe down below if you're not subscribed already. If you made it to the end and you don't know what else to say, just put this emoji in the comments just so I know who my subscribers are and who's rocking with me and watching my videos all the way through. Other than that, let's talk in the comments until my next upload. Talk soon, y'all. Bye.